Context matters. In Ignatian pedagogy, context is the very first thing that we are asked to consider. It's the recognition that every conversation that we have, every class that we attend is influenced by the place, the location, the culture where it is occurring. This conference is no different. This conference is designed for students who are leading in positional leadership opportunities at Seattle University, a Jesuit school within the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Aspects of the program will be influenced by Jesuit values and philosophy. Similarly, the conversations that you have at this conference are likely to be influenced by cultural ideas of leadership, both your own and the cultures of others. How each of us think about and discuss leadership, our personal identities and experience, values, and expectations are influenced by our personal context. So we want to dive in and identify ways in which our context may influence not only our own beliefs, values, styles, or language around leadership, but also others. We think this is important for a few reasons. It provides an opportunity to reflect on how these ideas have or have not influenced your own understanding of leadership, and it names that there are many other equally valid ways to think about leadership. It's an opportunity to explore and learn more. So let's get started. So we said this context, first and foremost, is happening within the United States. There are many aspects of U.S. history and culture that influence the conversations that we have about leadership at Seattle University. Even thinking about who historically has been included or excluded, not only in our country, but in higher education, it influences the cultural values, the dominant cultural values of our country and our United States higher education system as a whole. Leadership is sometimes defined by the desire to create solutions to today's problems. In our two-party system, many of our modern problems are phrased as this or that, either or, Democrat versus Republican. And that can influence sometimes the ways in which we approach solving those problems. It's a trap that we can find ourselves in and can limit how we view possible solutions. So that definitely influences how we think about leadership and how we approach leadership within the United States. Even the size or the scale of our country, believe it or not, can influence leadership. So there's all these different factors. The historical value placed on rugged individualism are, intentionally or not, likely to influence the conversations that you have around leadership. For example, the dominant social structure in the U.S. is what we describe as individualistic. In our culture, a person's success is most often defined by their individual status, their individual accomplishments, and often we think of leadership as pertaining to one specific individual or leader within a larger organization. In a more collectivist culture, you might define the success of a leader or leadership by the well-being, status, and accomplishments of the community or the collective as a whole. So if you take a moment to consider how you define leaders or leadership, does an organization have one leader, the president? Or are there many leaders? How many leaders are within any organization? How are you defining the success of that leader? And how are you defining leadership? It is important that you explore this not only for yourself, but to make space for how others might identify or answer these questions. Zooming in, we are located in Seattle, and our local history and culture will likely influence your leadership and what it will look like this year at Seattle U. Some examples would be to recognize that we are located in a gentrifying neighborhood. Our culture is more liberal, tends to be more indirect in its communication style, and the urbanness in which we find ourselves could impact everything from how we might approach or resolve a conflict with our peers to the critical lens that you might bring to your work with community partners. These additional factors, these are things that you would want to be aware of as you approach your leadership, and how the history of redlining or our relationship with our local Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities could impact how you approach your leadership at Seattle University. Finally, we must consider the context of Seattle U itself. We are a Jesuit institution, and our mission is, we hope that all of our leaders are leaving our institution feeling empowered to go out and create a more just and a more humane world. So this is an opportunity for us to consider our context, to consider how that would impact our conversations, and to make a choice, be intentional about how we use this awareness as we engage with one another and explore what this means to be leaders in our work, in our advocacy for this year.